In the age of Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless, scorching hot takes are the norm. But one came out this weekend that might be the stupidest take I have heard to date. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media at Yahoo Sports. Today on the show, we talk about Texas Tech's head coach Joey McGuire using a Texas Bowl victory in 2022 as a reason to discount Ole Miss in 2024. Caleb Cunningham visited Ole Miss over the weekend. They have a real shot to get the number one player in the state of Mississippi again. And these are players that we think might surprise when spring practice starts in a couple of weeks. This week's players will be coming on the channel as a part of our relationship with the Grove Collective. And a huge thank you to Keith Carter for coming on the show this past weekend. Subscribe now so you don't miss a thing. We want to thank all of you that subscribed recently and tell you that it means a ton, actually. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Special thanks for everybody making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the type of driver that likes to push things a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. So I was all set to do a show today about something dealing with spring practice, maybe Caleb Cunningham visiting. There was a lot of stuff. And through my research and show prep that I was trying to get together, I found a quote by Joey McGuire, and that led me down into a rabbit hole. And a little bit behind the scenes backstory for this is people in the Big 12 obviously are very pissed off at the SEC and the Big 10 for the 14-team playoff stuff. There's a lot of emotions going back and forth, and people are coming up with takes, and they're trying to back up those takes. That is what is happening at the moment. Now, Joey McGuire said this. I look at it like this. I can see where the SEC gets two teams in, and that's Alabama and Georgia. McGuire said in a recent interview at AT&T Jones Stadium in Lubbock. Now that Texas is in the SEC, I might even say Texas, even though I'm 1-1 against them, but they kicked my butt last time we played them. If I'm in the Big Ten, I'm going to see where I'm going to see where you get Michigan and Ohio State in. After that, we're talking about everybody else that's tagging along in that conference. This gives you an idea of where his mindset is on this. So he said, let's be honest. I read the other day a report that included Ole Miss in the discussion for the playoff. We beat Ole Miss 2 years ago, and it wasn't a close game, McGuire said of Texas Tech's 45-22 win over Ole Miss in the 2022 Texas Bowl. So we're going to stop right there and just let everybody marinate that. Part of Joey McGuire's argument for not expanding the playoff and having the automatic bids that he thought of, he literally got this through his head, and what he was doing was a football game that was played over a year ago. So much water has flown under the bridge since 2022, Joey. Everybody knows that. And congrats to Texas Tech for winning that football game. We got on the Lane Kiffin at the time for coaching that like a 9-year-old playing Madden. Ole Miss did not punt in the first half. They were obviously in a different mindset than Texas Tech in that ball game. But even though Texas Tech won that game, what did that lead to for Texas Tech? They obviously must have been a Big 12 champion type team in 2023. This is obviously must have been a good program that Ole Miss fans should pay attention to, because obviously losing the 2022 Texas Bowl was such a seminal event that everybody should be paying attention to that football game because it meant so much, apparently. If it justifies playoff spots in the 2024 playoff, the 2022 Texas Bowl must have been a ton. Okay. So, what happened in 2023 that Texas Tech rose up and they would use that game as a springboard that obviously meant so much for Texas Tech? Morton and Brooks lead Texas Tech past California 34-14 in the Independence Bowl. Yes, that Independence Bowl. Texas Tech, after they beat the vaunted Ole Miss Rebels in the Texas Bowl, they used that as a springboard for a mid-December game in Shreveport, Louisiana. Now, Texas Tech, they have an Independence Bowl history just like Ole Miss. And a lot of times it was Ole Miss beating Texas Tech in that game. But Ole Miss is not going to the Independence Bowl right now. Texas Tech went 6-6 last season. They weren't a particularly good football team. And obviously, that should matter if a springboard from 2022, a football game that was opt-outs and all of that happening, was a springboard into the 2024 playoff. Obviously, 2022, I mean, it means so much. Why was Texas Tech in this Independence Bowl? Why were they a mid-team? Is it because Joey McGuire did a poor job coaching the team? Is that what he's saying? That, maybe he's saying that he's such a bad coach that a win over Ole Miss in 2022 was relevant. I don't understand how a football game in 2022 pertains to the 2024 team. We heard a lot of the same stuff in December from Penn State fans discounting Ole Miss fans and how they were going to obviously run over Ole Miss and how the SEC was a tag-on league. And Ohio State fans said it was a tag-on league as well. And all of a sudden, Ohio State couldn't put up more than 3 points against Missouri. And Penn State got absolutely destroyed by this Ole Miss team that Texas Tech beat in the 2022 Texas Bowl on their way to an Independence Bowl championship in 2023. What's the justification? Why do you think that you winning a game in 2022 has anything to do with the 2024 playoff? Do we not understand the roster turnover? This might be explaining your 6-6, by the way. This might be explaining your Independence Bowl. If you don't understand the roster turnover that happens year to year in major college football, maybe you're not playing major college football. Ole Miss catching a stray because Texas Tech is a mid-program that is going to be on the outside looking in for the playoff for the foreseeable future is interesting to me. Again, Texas Tech won that football game. Great, super. You won a Texas Bowl. When was the last Access Bowl that Texas Tech played in? The last real bowl game? Because Ole Miss has been to 4 in the last 10 years. When was the last time Texas Tech did something like that? I understand beating a down Ole Miss team. And the way that season ended in 2022, that was a down Ole Miss team. But I don't understand looking at that and just saying, oh, we beat this team 2 years ago, so obviously they shouldn't be in the playoff discussion now. That's the dumbest, most asinine take in the history of asinine takes. That is trying to justify and trying to find anything to make your point, because if you look at all the facts overall, they're kind of right. The Big Ten and the SEC probably deserve 3 automatic bids. And you know what? They're probably going to take the majority of the at-large bids as well. That's just the way it is. And I understand that you might be on the outside looking in this new playoff sphere. You're in danger of getting Washington State or Oregon State whenever this new round of realignment happens. I get that. There's no Ann Richards or whatever to save you this time. It's a situation where I could see Oklahoma State. I could see Baylor. I could see Kansas even being from the Big 12 as teams that are lifted into these super conferences. Utah, one of the Arizona schools. I can see that. I see Texas Tech kind of ending up the same way New Mexico does, or New Mexico State, which, beating Auburn's, nothing to whine about. But be careful with your horrible takes, or at least be good enough in the relevant current scheme to back them up. Otherwise, it's just kind of fruitless and, I don't know, vapid. Joey McGuire, win more than 6 football games in 2024, and we'll see what happens. Simple as that. Maybe, just maybe, the Big 12 will be good enough and you will be good enough to where you can go on the road in the first round of the playoffs and get beat in Oxford, Mississippi. Until then, best of luck to you, and your takes are absolutely garbage. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. And Caleb Cunningham, the consensus 5-star wide receiver from Ackerman, Mississippi, visited yesterday. What does that mean for Ole Miss? Get buckets with your first bet from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. FanDuel, it's an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. So that is pretty cool indeed. Caleb Cunningham visited Ole Miss yesterday. Caleb Cunningham he's a dude. He's pretty much a consensus top 25 player in the country. If you look at the consensus, he's a 5-star, even though he's rated as a 4-star on all the individual services. A lot of that is because there's not that many 5-stars yet. So he'll probably end up being there. Caleb Cunningham is 20th on On3, 24th on 24/7, 16th on ESPN, and 20th on Rivals. His consensus ranking is 13th in the country. He's from Ackerman, Mississippi. He's just outside Starkville, Mississippi. And when I put these visit lists up there, you're not going to see Mississippi State on them. But that doesn't mean that, because he visited Mississippi State before the dead period. They're on that list as well. If you want to look at that top 10 list or top 8 list or whatever, Ole Miss yesterday, he's going to LSU this week. He has a visit set up for Alabama coming up there. It's not on the list, but that visit is going to happen. And then you have Florida State, Auburn, Tennessee, the U, Florida, and Texas A&M. And like I said, he's already visited Mississippi State. Those are likely going to be his 10 schools. Add Mississippi State and Alabama to this list, and you'll have his 10 schools. This is somebody that has made his bones at the high school level being a super superior athlete. If you go to his huddle film and look at it, he just put on dunk contest in high school basketball. His athletic ability at wide receiver is out of this world, and Mississippi State's going to go all in on this prospect. This is somebody where everybody knows their NIL situation, which is getting a little bit better, but it's not quite there yet. They're going to get better and better because Jeff Lebby is going to use a lot of the same stuff that he saw Lane Kiffin did when he was at Ole Miss and stuff that they did at Oklahoma, and they're going to incorporate that into Mississippi State. So it's going to get a little bit better, but it's not where it needs to be. But a player like this, there is going to be a booster that is willing to go outside the norm of a collective to make this deal happen. So Mississippi State's a major player in this recruitment, and he has been prioritized at the utmost degree by Jeff Lebby and that Mississippi State staff. At the end of the day, I think it could be a Mississippi State Ole Miss type competition. And Kelvin Bolden is rolled out the red carpet for Caleb Cunningham, talking about the big name wide receivers from the state of Mississippi that Ole Miss has put into the league. So I'm sure they're going to do all that. Caleb Cunningham, I think, to my knowledge, was the only person on campus. So that whole staff gave him all the attention in the world. You can bet that he is going to feel all the love in the world while he's visiting there and other places around the South. He's going to go through the same thing at State, at at LSU, at Alabama, at Auburn, at Tennessee, Miami, Florida. And props to him for visiting Miami. This isn't a Mario Cristobal or he should go to Miami. He should visit Miami because Miami's cool, South Beach, all of that stuff. It's nice to experience that when you're somebody from Ackerman, Mississippi. So props to him for doing that. I'd also take an unofficial visit out to Arizona State. Honestly, I would. But that's just me. He's a really good football player, and Ole Miss is trying to think of what the next level is going to look like for Ole Miss football. Caleb Cunningham's never going to play with Jackson Dart. He's not. Jackson Dart has been one of Ole Miss's ace recruiters, so next year it's going to be different because that connection of playing with Dart is not going to be as big for somebody like Caleb Cunningham. So it's going to be very important for Ole Miss over the next 12 months or 8 months or whatever it is to pump up Austin Simmons, to pump up Walker Howard, and let Caleb Cunningham know about these two players. They need to do whatever they can to get them on the field this year. Now, Ole Miss needs some blowouts probably for that to happen, but Ole Miss needs Austin Simmons and Walker Howard to play meaningful football to make wide receivers see these quarterbacks, because these are going to be the guys that are going to lead this team forward. These are going to be the guys that are going to be important for recruiting Caleb Cunningham, for recruiting a Kylan Deere, for recruiting Deuce Knight, for lack of a better word. Even though they're quarterbacks coming in, those skill players, you need quarterbacks to be the ringleaders. And Austin Simmons, who has been organizing 7-on-7 trips into the IPF, Walker Howard's a great football player as well, 5-star. Both of these players have the talent to do it. Who has the personality to do it? Who is going to take the bull by the horns and just let themselves be known? It's like, hey, I'm the next year guy. I'm the guy you need to focus on. I'm the one you need to pay attention to. We're going to be really good at football this year. I understand that. With you, we can be really good at football next year because I'm really good at football. That needs to be a focal point over the next 8 months. It can't get into, as far as the football season goes, we're going to talk about Jackson Dart a ton. We just are. I did a video yesterday on the Heisman. So we're going to talk about him a ton. But when you're dealing with recruiting, Jackson Dart's not important for recruits. Ole Miss winning's important, so I guess you could say Jackson Dart is important that way. But they're more interested in what's coming down the pike. And Ole Miss needs to basically put a commercial out there, essentially on the field, through spring practice, through the fall games, and getting them into the game quite a bit of these players. And I understand that Ole Miss does not play young players very much. They just don't. And because of that, it's difficult to do this. But if you are able to just put in the shop window a little bit Austin Simmons, so that players like Caleb Cunningham can see what they're going to come in and play with. And this isn't a no room left at the end type situation for quarterbacks. there's some dudes over there. You're going to put yourself in a better place for high school recruiting. So we'll see exactly how that goes for Ole Miss in 2024. Still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We have players that we are tapping to surprise when spring practice starts in a couple of weeks. And just stick around for that. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue, for instance. I drive a Rogue. I love my Rogue. My wife, for whatever reason, named my Rogue Russell, but she did. She named it Russell. It's perfect for city drives and great escapes. It's got class exclusive Google built, and it is always your updating assistance to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Nissan's incredible lineup also includes the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It has room for up to 8 expansive cargo capacity. Sorry about that. And with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing, when the adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, and Nissan Armada to go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. And thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. And shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. And also, Amazon's going to be advertising on the show this week, so I'm pretty excited about that as well. Now, spring practice is a couple of weeks away, and we need to start thinking and getting our mind right around spring football. And I think surprises might be the area that we need to really pay attention to. Who are the players that are going to surprise? Because every spring practice, there's a surprise player. Now, as far as lack of recognition and not being able to put eyes on, I think Kedrick Risano is somebody that could absolutely surprise, but he doesn't necessarily fit what I'm talking about today. I think we have a situation to where there are a couple of players that Ole Miss have actively recruited to replace them. Not in a negative way or anything like that. They just want competition at the position. But a player that I'm looking at in spring practice is Jeremy James. He is the number one player that I'm going to be paying attention to as a starter coming back in spring practice. Jeremy James played a lot of right guard last season. Ole Miss since then has recruited Jerquan Scott, Julius Bulow, and Eli Acker plays that position as well as Preston Cushman and Bryson Sanders. That's a lot of competition for that right guard position. Now, are you going to rise up to that competition, or are you going to let another one of those players take your job? And there's going to be some situations to where transfers are going to come in and play. I'm not saying there's not. I think this situation is a little bit different. Now, one problem that Ole Miss had a year ago were the holding penalties. And a lot of that, to me, can be resolved with a uniform, honestly. I think Ole Miss's offensive lineman, whenever they play at home, needs to wear white gloves. And when they play on the road, they should wear colored gloves. If you add those together and you do that, it's going to make it harder for the official to see whatever is happening. I think Ole Miss needs to start looking for advantages because other teams have found a way to get officials to call this. It's a situation to where they know what's going on. Everybody's like Micah Pettis. He holds all the time. Well, he doesn't hold as much as everybody else. I mean, it's all about the same thing. I think the problem with Micah Pettis is it's more visible. I think the problem with Jeremy James is it's more visible. Now, there does need to be some technique work to where you're not grabbing. I mean, it'll help if you're not grabbing and you're just pushing, but it's hard to do that. The way you're taught to block and things like that, technique-wise, is difficult. So I think the first step for Ole Miss will be a uniform deal. And if Ole Miss can get right there and can cut down on the holding penalties, this offense is really going to unlock. It didn't slow down the offense very much last year anyway, but it has a chance to get even better. And I think Jeremy James, I think he's going to beat out Julius Buelow. I think he's going to beat out Jeriquan Scott. I think he's going to be the starting right guard at the end of spring. And in that case, he's going to use his technique to get a little bit better. And uniform-wise, I can see where they will change it up a little bit and make it a little bit harder on the officials. Another player that I think might show up and show out is Caden Lee. I haven't talked about him over the wide receivers over the past few weeks, but this is a guy that hardly played during the season. Went in against Penn State, the number one defense in all of college football, and he was essentially uncoverable. If you needed a first down, Caden Lee was there to do it. Him and Jordan Watkins in the slot position has really made it their own. There's a body type. There's a type of wide receiver that is successful there. And even whenever I'm talking about like Juice Wells, what he could do, because I do think he could end up in the slot as well, but he could end up on the outside because the purpose of this is going to be, I think, Ole Miss getting their three best wide receivers on the field for the majority of the time. That's Trey Harris, whether that's Deion Smith, whether it's Jordan Watkins, whether it's Juice Wells, whether it's Aiden Williams, Caden Lee, those guys, they want to get the best receivers on the field. I think Caden Lee in year 2 is going to surprise in spring. He's such a good, quick wide receiver. He is that prototypical slot type wide receiver. And if he can kind of worm his way into the end of spring rotation, I'm not saying he's going to start by the end of spring. That's not what I'm saying about Caden Lee. But if he is in the rotation going into fall, there's a chance for a surprise to happen as we get closer to the season because he's genuinely a good receiver, a really good receiver. And him and Aiden Williams and Darrell White and those guys, they're going to be preparing with Austin Simmons. They're going to be preparing with Walker Howard because they've got about the next 12 months to position themselves for the most important spring in their life. That's coming. Because whenever Trey Harris graduates, whenever Juice Wells graduates, whenever Deion Smith leaves, Ole Miss is going to go backfill them in the transfer portal. So you need to be in a position to where you are making the position your own and creating so much of a league that they can't catch you. That needs to be the plan, and that starts right now, honestly. But those are two players that I am really looking forward to watching this spring. Jeremy James, Caden Lee, those are two potential surprise players for me in spring practices, and it should be a lot of fun for Ole Miss fans. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Every day as we have players interviews slated for this weekend, and we wait on the most anticipated football season at Ole Miss maybe ever, and you can hear about it all here. But for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available for free on the Fire TV Channels app. And for those of you on YouTube, we're going to send you right there right now. Have a good day, everybody. Hotty toddy.